क्या ऑपरेशन से आया नहीं देखे जुमरात से पहले पहले खालिद भाई हाँ भाई कैसा है वो मेरे को वो चाहिए ये पकड़ना था इधर रखना ये खालिद भाई हाँ भूख लगी भूख लगी वो चावल खत्म हो गया
State Department also said that Blinken back in April had written to the Israeli Defense Minister a similar letter over its concerns. Our reporter just earlier in the show was saying that, yes, while aid may have increased a little bit at the time, it's drastically been reduced since then.
Well, I really don't put me in a situation of the army spokesman. I'm not. And what I know from the media, as you know from the media, and you may say that it is wrong, I may say that it is right, I'm not sure. But to the best of my knowledge, after there is a debate in Israel, there are those in Israel who say, don't allow any drug to the Hamas, but apparently this is not the policy of the government.
Okay, understood. So let's just focus then. Since you say that there is a conversation in Israel, what is the conversation right now about the situation with Lebanon and what's happening on the border there?
I think that about Lebanon, there is a consensus. Hezbollah said from the beginning, from October the 8th or the 9th, that it is shooting and fighting Israel as long as Israel and Hamas are fighting each other. When there will be a ceasefire there, then there will be a ceasefire in Lebanon. It is a matter of a year, more than a year, in which, without any provocation, Hezbollah is doing what is doing. And today, of course, the confrontation is much sharper and more difficult, not easy for both sides. So the consensus is that if Hezbollah is moving to the north of the Litani River, then there is a room for a ceasefire. Now, when the deputy of the leader of Hamas, of Hezbollah, is saying that the solution is a ceasefire, he is saying the right thing, but he is not reneging on the policy which says that you have to first have a ceasefire in the south, and ceasefire in the south means a ceasefire without the return of the Israeli hostages, which is impossible.
Okay, thank you so much for speaking to us from Tel Aviv this hour. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Just 3 weeks ago, until the U.S. presidential election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are reaching out to voters who could tip the balance on November the 5th. The vice president and the Democratic candidate is focusing on black male voters on Tuesday, while her Republican rival is seeking support among women. It follows a day of campaigning in Pennsylvania, one of the battleground states. Voters in 2 states are heading to the polls early to cast their ballots. Georgia and North Carolina are doing so to allow for recent changes to election laws and the impact from last month's hurricane.
I think this is an existential election. It's going to have implications for my children and my 3 grandsons and more to come. So it's critically important that everyone at least voices their vote.
This is probably the most important voting season of our lifetime. I think it's imperative that every single person vote to help save democracy.
Okay, we'll bring in our White House correspondent, Kimberly Hunter, who's joining us now from Washington, D.C. So the election, Kimberly, has effectively already started.
Yeah, it's already started, and as you mentioned, part of that reason is not only is it starting in Georgia and North Carolina because of damage from the hurricane, but there's another reason too, and that has to do with it seems to take so long to count these ballots now in the United States for some unknown reason. So as a result, they're starting early so that they can get busy on the counting. The more that the people cast their ballots and they count, the more that's done ahead of time, and that leaves less to do come November 5th when people are eager for those results. So that's another reason that some of these election laws have changed, particularly when it comes to those battleground states. You really want to get as much done as possible. But the bottom line in all of this is that it is a tight race, and that's what we've heard over and over, and that's what makes this presidential election different from previous ones. We're really talking about less than 1% of difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump when it comes to these two campaigns. So they're really appealing to those undecided voters, and there's very little movement between them. And that has to do with the two competing ideologies in the United States and the fact that there are two very different visions. Just very quickly, when it comes to the economy, it looks from the eyes of many Trump supporters that things are really bad and getting worse. Kamala Harris supporters think it's not so great, but it's getting better. So when you have such different views of how things are and the prescription for solving them, it means the campaigns really have a challenge of trying to reach those undecided voters and get their message out.
Okay, so what are the candidates' plans for today? What should we be watching out for?
Well, when you watch the campaigns and you see where they go, you know who they're targeting. So what we can tell from what they're doing is that they're really trying to reach the African American voters, particularly men. When you look at Donald Trump's schedule today, he's been in Chicago, he's also going to Atlanta, and he's tackling the economy. These are areas and where there is a largely African American population, and also we know that the economy is of particular concern to African American men. And so that's really where he seems to be thinking, I'm going to score some points. But Kamala Harris is looking for that as well, because traditionally this is a vote that's gone to the Democrats. She doesn't want to lose those votes, so she's in Detroit. She's also reaching out to those very same voters, not wanting to give any ground to Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly Hoffett, reporting from the White House. To Nigeria, where flooding in the central Kogi state has displaced almost 2 million people. Water released from a dam in neighboring Cameroon, along with heavy rainfall, has caused two rivers to burst their banks. State officials say 200 communities are submerged, with schools, hospitals, and other critical infrastructure damaged. Rescue operations are underway, and the state government is appealing for international help. Ahmed Idris reports from Lokoja in central Nigeria.
Another flood victim trying to make it to safety. And since we've been here, we've seen dozens of people escaping with their animals, the few belongings they were able to salvage from their homes to get to safety. But when they come to land, they are confronted by another bigger problem: the lack of accommodation to accommodate the hundreds of thousands of people displaced by this disaster, and also the lack of food and water. Now, a lot of people are complaining that over the past few days that they've been displaced by this disaster, they've received little food aid from the Nigerian government or from the state government. As a state emergency official told Al Jazeera that they have brought in a lot of food stuff and distributed some to people in displaced persons camp. In fact, they're talking about 42 displaced persons camps open for the hundreds of thousands displaced by this disaster. But when you go there and talk to victims of this disaster, they will tell you that they haven't seen enough. And in fact, where we are right now, the Edeha community, most of them are living by the highway. They are taking shelters in makeshift structures, trying to live from handouts they get from well-wishers, members of family. And when the donations from government comes, they take it. But what they're saying right now is that they don't have enough. They don't have the shelter, and they don't even have drinking water. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Edeha community, Central Nigeria.
Babatunde Oje is the Nigeria Country Director for the International Rescue Committee, and he says they are closely monitoring the situation.
It's really quite overwhelming on ground. As you heard, the number is at 1 billion already, and definitely more than 200 communities, according to some reports coming, have been submerged. And the state is actually declaring this a humanitarian crisis already. So IRC, as well as other international organizations, are closely monitoring the situation and coordinating with local authorities to make sure that we're able to deploy services to those areas. And I think it's unfortunate that this is happening at this time. And when you consider that just a few weeks back, we had over 1 million people displaced in Maiduguri as a result of the dam that broke in that axis. And this is becoming, as the chief said, a yearly thing that needs to have better planning to actually support.
North Korea has blown up some of the roads along its border with the South. In response, the South Korean army says it fired warning shots within its own territory. And the two have exchanged threats recently after Pyongyang accused the South of flying drones over its capital. Zain Basrabi has more.
A day after issuing a warning, North Korea blew up roads on its side of the border with South Korea. A violent but symbolic gesture, severing a path connecting the two rivals. The South Korean military responded by firing warning shots on its own territory. The episode signals escalating tensions on the peninsula. Pyongyang accuses Seoul of routinely violating its airspace. On Sunday, the powerful sister of leader Kim Jong-un warned there would be consequences.
The scattering of leaflets over the capital city will be regarded as a grave, politically motivated provocation and an infringement upon our sovereignty. But the fact that drones carried the leaflets is at the core of the seriousness of this incident.
South Korea's military has denied sending drones north, but Pyongyang says it has clear evidence its southern neighbor was behind drones that reached Pyongyang in recent weeks. Activists and North Korean defectors also fly balloons into the north, carrying aid parcels and leaflets criticizing Kim. The north has retaliated with its own balloons, filled with trash, even human waste. On Tuesday, South Korea condemned the destruction of the roads.
오늘 북한의 경의선 통해서
What North Korea has done is a clear violation of the Inter-Korean Agreement. We see it as a very abnormal act, and the government strongly condemns it.
North Korea has spent months laying mines and building anti-tank barriers, and after pledging last week to permanently seal its southern border, blowing up some roads may be only the beginning of a diplomatic winter. Zain Basravi, Al Jazeera.
Still ahead on Al Jazeera, rising from the ashes, Indonesia's National Museum reopens its doors a year after a devastating fire. Spanish police say they've seized 13 tons of banned chemicals that were bound for Russia. They include material that police say could be used in chemical weapons or nerve agents. They were found inside a container at Barcelona's port. 4 suspected members of the crime ring have been arrested. They're accused of circumventing Western sanctions. The European Union has imposed sweeping sanctions on Moscow since 2022 over the war in Ukraine. Prague has become the latest European city to crack down on antisocial behavior by tourists after announcing a ban on guided nighttime pub crawls. City councillors in the Czech capital say they want to target more cultured tourists. So from next month, guided drinking tours will be prohibited between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. The city has long been a popular destination for noisy stag parties, mainly from the US and the UK. Indonesia's National Museum is welcoming back visitors a year after a fire tore through the building, destroying many historic artifacts. A new exhibition is showcasing repatriated items taken by the Netherlands during the colonial period. Jessica Washington reports from Jakarta.
In central Jakarta, this building has a history older than the nation of Indonesia itself. It opened to the public in the late 1800s and was officially called the National Museum in the 1970s. But last year, an electrical fire tore through the building, damaging or destroying some of the priceless artifacts inside.
Data yang kita rilis berarti 900 collections were affected by the fire. Some objects were bronze and others were wood. Some experienced serious damage.
The museum was closed for 1 year to renovate and repair the building and to restore some of the collections. There's even a room filled with some of the damaged objects, bronze statues that turned purple after the fire, and traditional textiles and wooden structures destroyed beyond recognition. More fire extinguishers have been added and the electrical systems have been fixed. But some say the fire also provided an opportunity to rethink the museum's purpose and create a more curated, interactive experience for visitors.
Kita sekarang sedang mengambil carrying out a fundamental transformation of the National Museum and learning from past experiences, preparing not only the physical infrastructure but also human resources. We are ready to accommodate the artifacts.
It reopens its doors with an exhibition called Repatriasi, meaning repatriation, which celebrates the return of historic artifacts from the Netherlands to Indonesia. Some of these objects were in the Netherlands as part of a diplomatic cultural exchange initiative, but many were taken during the colonial occupation era. Before returning these artifacts, the Dutch government noted that many of these items should not have been in the Netherlands in the first place, stating that during the colonial period, cultural artifacts were often looted or changed hands involuntarily. The repatriated objects include these 4 Hindu Buddhist sculptures taken from Java to the Netherlands in the first half of the 19th century.
It's like a healing process. With the return of these items, which were forcibly taken by the Netherlands, Indonesia is not necessarily interested in repatriating a huge number of artifacts. We just need the important ones.
More than 80 objects were recently repatriated. Most have not yet gone on display. The staff at the museum worked to carefully unbox all the items, including these doors, which were taken from a Balinese kingdom. Other items on display include artifacts returned in recent years by the Netherlands, including ancient weapons and extravagant gold and diamond jewelry. Jessica Washington, Al Jazeera, Jakarta.
Okay, thanks for watching the News Hour on Al Jazeera. We'll have more news coming up in just a moment. Bye-bye for now.
They tell us that the Israeli forces do not differentiate between Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and international activists.
Emergency rooms waiting areas on the floors of Gaza's hospitals are full.
From here on, and with no end in sight.
500,000 Israelis rallied in Tel Aviv, calling for a deal to bring back the remaining Israeli captives.
The war continues.
And many tell us that the screams from the cells where Gaza prisoners were held still haunt them.
Every single person is exhausted, sick, and long past the limit of their endurance.
On counting the cost, oil markets braced for escalating tension in the Middle East. How would that affect prices? Many nations are pushing back against China's exports of cheap electric cars. We'll tell you why. Plus, will Thailand's so-called digital wallets help grow its economy? Counting the cost on Al Jazeera.
A year into the genocide in Gaza, Al Jazeera returns to what was its largest hospital. Shifa had turned into a center for the internally displaced with between 30 and 50,000 people. The second attack ended with a massacre, turning Shifa into a mass grave where over 400 bodies were found. Survivors reflect on the devastation and determination to never give up. Al Shifa Hospital, Annihilation and Resilience on Al Jazeera. the latest news as it breaks.
The Israeli military claiming that these areas are used by militants, but what we're seeing here is completely the opposite.
With detailed coverage, despite the clear evidence presented by UN agencies forming the basis to our crimes and genocide continues unabated.
From the heart of the story,
Israel always makes intensifying physical things to cut the way for the people who are trying to escape the relentless attacks.
Israel steps up bombardments across Lebanon, carrying out at least 200 air raids on Hezbollah targets in the east. I'm Famida Bana. This is Al Jazeera Live from Doha. Also coming up, Hezbollah's deputy chief says a ceasefire is the only solution to the conflict, but warns the group will target anywhere in Israel. The US gives Israel 30 days to improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza or risk losing military aid. And we're in Nigeria, where two major rivers have flooded, submerging hundreds of communities and displacing more than 1 million people. Hezbollah's deputy leader says the group has adopted a new calculation to inflict pain on Israel. Naim Qasem also says the group will hit military targets throughout Israel if no ceasefire is agreed. The comments follow the death of at least 41 people in Israeli airstrikes. Israel's military says it's carried out 200 air raids on Hezbollah targets in the past 24 hours. Dosa Jabari begins our coverage from Beirut.
This is the aftermath of one of the 200 airstrikes Israel said it carried out across Lebanon in a 24-hour period. The village of Beisariya in the southern Sidon province, reduced to rubble. It's one of hundreds of villages where people have been forcibly displaced. The UN Refugee Agency says the Israeli military has issued evacuation orders for 25% of Lebanon. For the third time since the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, his deputy Naim Qasem delivered a pre-recorded message calling for an end to this war.
I say to the Israeli home front, the solution is a ceasefire. We're not speaking from a position of weakness. If the Israeli side does not want it, we will continue. After the ceasefire, according to the indirect agreement, settlers will return to the north, and other steps will be outlined. However, with the continuation of the war, the number of uninhabited settlements will increase, and hundreds of thousands, even more than 2 million, will be in danger at any time, any hour, any day.
A sentiment echoed by Lebanon's caretaker government. In an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera, the interim Prime Minister Najib Mikati stressed that a ceasefire is the only way out of the conflict.
The Foreign Affairs Ministry asked for a request to be submitted to the UN Security Council for a complete ceasefire on the borders between Lebanon and occupied Palestine and Israel.
Israel's campaign of air raids has caused widespread destruction and forced an estimated 1.2 million people from their homes.
It's very clear that a ceasefire is necessary. If you don't stop firing and return to what we were, we will continue this confrontation. And in the resistance's plans, there are surprises. It's clear that even the Israelis have come to a certain reassessment, since they've not achieved their stated objectives in the first phase.
The diplomatic push includes the United States, Israel's biggest ally. Prime Minister Mikati says the Biden administration has provided assurances that Israel will de-escalate its attacks on Beirut, but many here are skeptical such promises can be trusted. Dorsa Jabari, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
The Israeli military has intensified its bombing campaign in eastern Lebanon. The Bekaa Valley saw multiple airstrikes on Tuesday. Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah sites, but many strikes hit residential areas. Hassan Beg is in Baalbek.
It's been an intense night of airstrikes here. In fact, residents have told us
that it's been one of the most intensive Israeli bombings that they have experienced since the start of this conflict. Now, this building here was hit in the early hours of Tuesday morning. It's left a huge crater, it's left debris across the street. Some fires are still burning, there's still smoke rising, but it's only about 100 meters away from a hospital. Now, we visited that hospital that's been forced to close its doors. Over 80 patients have been evacuated to different hospitals. There's been considerable damage inside to the ER ward, to the children's ward. The ceilings have come down, the windows blown in, equipment also damaged, but also people who are injured after debris from here hit that hospital. And even whilst we've been filming today, there have been Israeli airstrikes nearby, just over 500 to 600 meters away. And people fear and feel that last night is just a beginning of a new phase that Baalbek must face. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera, Baalbek, Lebanon.
Emergency crews are working to rescue survivors and retrieve the bodies of Palestinians from Jabalia. The area has been targeted by Israeli forces for more than 10 days and came under heavy shelling early in the war. The UN's warned Israel that forcing civilians out of the northern part of Gaza through bombardment would constitute a war crime. Tariq Al-Wazoum has more from Deir al-Bala.
11 days and Jabalia refugee camp is still under very tight humanitarian security siege. No aid were delivered as families there are still trapped under heavy land and aerial attacks by the Israeli fighting jets and infantry units, which are battling inside the heart-beating and key urban centers in Jabalia. We need to remind our viewers that Jabalia refugee camp just covers 1.4 square kilometers of the space in the north. All the strip of the eyes of the Israeli military is on Jabalia. They believe that Jabalia is a stronghold for Hamas movement, but at the same time there has been a clear intensification of airstrikes now, where families are no longer able to flee from Jabalia or even to cope with the growing security concerns that are facing them in light of the full military closure of all ways that are leading to Gaza City. It means that these families now are really going through systematic destruction of their residential homes and ongoing carnage that continues to unfold everyone there in that very trapped corner of the strip. Tariq Al-Wazoum, Al Jazeera, Deir al-Bala, Palestine.
The US has given Israel 30 days to improve Gaza's humanitarian situation or risk losing military aid. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin have written a joint letter to their Israeli counterparts. They voiced what they called their deep concern over the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Strip.
What we have seen over the past few months is that the level of humanitarian assistance has not been sustained. In fact, it has fallen by over 50% from where it was at its peak. So the Secretary, along with Secretary Austin, thought it was appropriate to make clear to the government of Israel that there are changes that they need to make again to see that the level of assistance making it into Gaza comes back up from the very, very low levels that it is at today.
All right, let's get more on this from Alan Fisher, who's at the State Department. Alan, talk us through this ultimatum from the US.
Well, the amount of aid that's going into Gaza is at an incredibly low level. There were 700 trucks went into Gaza in August, around 300 in September, and we're hearing reports that today there were around 30 trucks going in. That's the first time this month that any aid has gone into Gaza. And you've got to remember that they need somewhere in the region of 300 trucks a day to provide for the people there. So the United States is taking action, warning the Israelis in what was meant to be, we are told, a private letter between officials of both governments telling the Israelis that they have to take steps to ensure 350 trucks are getting in a day, that there's a pause in the fighting to allow the aid to be delivered, and also they've got to rescind evacuation orders for the civilians in Gaza when there is no operational need for those. And they've got to do all this within the next 30 days, or the US will consider ending military aid or certainly restricting military aid. This is the clearest ultimatum that the Biden White House has yet given to the Israelis. They're telling them essentially, you've got to get more aid into Gaza and you've got to do it now, because people like the United Nations and the World Food Programme are saying there's 2.2 million people in Gaza at risk of starvation because they're simply not getting enough to eat.
It seems to be one of the stronger messages from the United States. So, how is Israel likely to receive it?
Of course, it doesn't indicate that there's any massive change in the Biden approach to the Israelis. The White House saying that essentially the letter from Lloyd Austin and Antony Blinken is in line with the communications that they've had with the Israelis. What we've seen in the past, of course, is that when the US has expressed concern about the amount of trucks that are getting into Gaza, there has been a temporary improvement, and we saw that back in April. And certainly Joe Biden has talked about it as far back as February. So there is a temporary improvement. So it's possible that there could be a slight change, a slight improvement in the situation. But it's very clear what the US is asking, and it'll be interesting to see if they actually will stop aid. Because, of course, by restricting aid, that is against not just international law, but US law. And there would be an obligation on the Biden White House to actually take action against Israel and stop and block military aid until the situation improves.
All right, and that's the very next question at the United States. Alan Fisher at the State Department, thanks very much. Well, let's bring in Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He's joining us from London. Marwan, is this a sincere ultimatum from the US, or is it saying what it thinks needs to be said for the sake of critics and the international community?
Yes, if they are serious, it's a welcome development. I doubt they are serious. In fact, I think they are basically trying to trick us all in the world about what their intentions are and about what their role is. You think it's a coincidence that they're writing this letter the day they are deploying their most sophisticated defense system, the TAD, in Israel? Well, they are preparing probably the most important confrontation within the region in the Middle East against Iran, along with Israel. Basically, the United States will be a participant in a potential regional war. Of course not. But there are no such coincidences, right? So one could wish for it, but one would think it's wishful thinking that the Americans suddenly decided to have or to grow a conscience about people starting in Gaza when months